Oh, me, oh, me. Oh. Oh, hello there. How are you doing? Yes, it's me, Grant Wiley. You may recognize me from such videos as Opening Enemies of Rome, Hold Fast Korea, How to Play, or Unboxing Next War Poland. You know, it's funny. Nice seeing you. No, don't leave. Please stay. I was thinking about you earlier today as I was reading a Wall Street Journal newspaper article on the beer industry. Yeah, the beer industry. Talking about how microbreweries were just a small segment of the beer industry in the United States. The two big beverage companies, AmBev and one other, own like 80% of all beer industry in the United States. And how it related to the game market. That the war game market is a microcosm, the microbrewery of the board game industry. Euro games are the big dog. They're bigger than anything going right now. What are your thoughts on this? You know, I've really gotten back into board gaming in the last 2 or 3 years, even though I was doing, running Worthington Publishing and Worthington Games since 2004. My focus was on that, wargaming. And in the last probably 3 to 5 years, I've gotten more into board gaming. Terraforming Mars is one of my absolute favorite games right now. You know, if you're a war gamer, you look back over the history of the industry and, you know, Avalon Hill, and then along comes SPI in Columbia, and I think they start nipping at the market share that Avalon Hill had in the 60s and early 70s, and all these other companies start coming along, you know, GDW, and they start taking chunks out of Avalon Hill. You know, Avalon Hill would sell hundreds, 100,000 games was a norm for them. And today, I think for a war game company, you look at GMT Games, a hit for them would be in the tens of thousands of games. I don't know where they stand right now with Twilight Struggle. I believe Twilight Struggle is their top game. But I believe they're approaching, if they're not at 100,000, probably over 100,000 sales on that. Now you compare that to Ticket to Ride, which, 22 million sales? You know, that's one in every 12 households in the United States would have a copy of Ticket to Ride. But I was just reading that board game sales are up now across the globe by like 26, I think it was 26%, $1.4 billion in sales worldwide in just the hobby game category. Now that's hobby games. That's not, you're not talking about Hasbro or Parker Brothers, you know, games I've gotten away from. Those are more your kid and family style games. You know, Hasbro ended up buying out Avalon Hill and was bought out by WizKids. You know, a lot of people say the demise of Avalon Hill came about because of the role-playing games. Now, I started as a war gamer in like 1976, 77, playing Caesar at Elysia, which then went to War at Sea and Victory in the Pacific, and, you know, the old classics, D-Day, Stalingrad, and those, once you got into it, you were into it. Terrible Swift Sword, I was looking for bigger and deeper games, something that felt more like a simulation. And then I did get into Dungeons and Dragons, but I never lost my wargaming roots. And even today, I'll sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons if the opportunity arises. They've even expanded that market. If you're a Star Wars fan, they've got Star Wars role-playing games. But I was just looking at some statistics here. U.S. Canada game sales, collectible games, $750 million. Collectible games. Non-collectible miniature games, I guess this would be where your Cool Mini or Not come in to 205 million. Hobby board games, which I think the board game industry would fall under. Hobby board games, 305 million, and then you've got your card and dice games, 130 million. But the smallest percentage, role-playing games, 45 million. Because you don't need much for a role-playing game. All you need is your imagination, a dungeon layout, and some dice. So sales-wise, it's not huge, but player-wise, I think it is pretty huge. Raise your hand if you have ever seen an episode of Will Wheaton's Shut Up and Sit Down or Tabletop. I even got to where on Saturday nights locally they showed Tabletop followed by his role-playing game, Titan, something on Titan, Clash on Titan or something. But I know this is kind of rambling, but I'm just trying to throw some ideas out here on board games and war games. I printed out the top 10 board games from last year. The global, and I looked up a research thing, the global board game market strategic and assessment forecast for 2017 to 2022. So we're looking forward now, guys. The board game market will grow at a rate of 9% during 2016-2022. Sales in the U.S. last year, 2016-2017, grew by 28%. There's not a lot of industries, I don't care where you're at, that are growing at that rate. When I read about microbreweries in the Wall Street Journal becoming such a big part of the beer industry, and then, Worthington with our little niche in the market, and GMT, and some of the great game companies, Compass. When Avalon Hill fell, GMT stepped in. They became the big dog in the game industry. And kudos to, Andy and Tony and Gene and the guys over there at GMT, because they make great games. But you've had a lot of great smaller companies come along since then. You had Avalon Hill fall, then you still had GMT, you had Columbia, who's been around forever, Grant and Tom over there. You had Avalanche Press, and then little companies like Worthington, we stepped in, Compass Games, Mark Walker Lock and Load, who's now Flying Pigs. Lock and Load's still around, but Mark's got Flying Pig game. So the board game industry, a lot of people think the 60s and 70s were the golden age of wargaming. Guys, I think we're living in the golden age of wargaming now. And they're not all necessarily hex and counter games. There are so many different games out there with different systems. You take Academy Games, Uwe at Academy Games with his 1812 Birth of America series. Now you've got the Birth of Europe with Vikings. Similar system, it's area movement. Columbia's done area movement and point-to-point forever. I don't think they got into the hex or the counter games until, not the counter, the hex games, until they did like Gettysburg and Shiloh and a couple of those. But still, their bread and butter is area and point-to-point. You have Hammer the Scotch, you've got Ron Draker's, Victory in Europe. So I think now we're living in the golden age of wargaming, because you've got all these different companies, these different, there may be nobody that's selling 500,000 copies of a war game, and I don't know what Avalon Hill's top sales of a war game ever were, but I know it was over 100,000. And GMT may have hit it with Twilight Struggle, but most of their games even aren't hitting 10,000. I love Mark Miklos's Rev War series, and probably some of those haven't sold 5,000-6,000 games, but they're great games. But you take all these small companies, us, Academy, Compass, and guys, please don't take offense that I'm calling Academy Games a small company when they've had sales of, 500,000 or close to $1 million on Fife, Barney. But you've got all these companies that may be equaling Avalon Hill sales from the day or even higher. you've got more choices in games than you've ever had before, I think. I can't keep my games up enough. I do so much buying, selling, swapping on Board Game Geek and, you know, just through pre-order campaigns that my wife probably is ready to divorce me. This face, no way. But it's just interesting because, you know, sometimes you feel like a small fish in a big pond, but there's a lot of small fish in this big pond, and we're all, you know, getting fed. Something that probably has helped the board game industry in the last 5 years more than anything else is, and some people hate it, but Kickstarter, you know, Indiegogo. We personally use Kickstarter as like our P500 system. We're much more narrowly focused. We can focus on one game at a time, whereas you go to GMT and they've got their P500 page, which is awesome because you can go on and you can see where everybody stands. Well, Kickstarter works like that, but you're just focused on one game at a time. Kickstarter only allows the company to have one game active at a time on their site. They want you focused on it. So those of you that don't like backing a game on Kickstarter, guys, it's the same thing as going to GMT's P500 page. It lets us know if there's interest. And for a small game company, that's huge. I need to know if I'm going to sell, you know, 250 or 2,500 of a game, because with the printers you get a little bit different pricing. Not a huge break, but at least some. And for a small company, that makes the difference between staying in business and not staying in business. So I hope, you know, this rambling of me here tonight. I was going to do a box opening or set up a game and play through a couple turns, but I thought just talking about the board game industry, send your comments below on your thoughts. You know, what's your experience with board games? Do you find that you're having more choices now than ever before? I know personally I do. You know, and some of the other companies I didn't mention, I want to make sure I throw out their name. Hollandspiel, Dan, God, please don't, DVG Games. I don't want to forget anybody. Compass Multiman, Avalanche Press. Oh boy, if I'm forgetting your name, guys, apology. I know Compass Academy, Lock and Load, Legion War Games, Columbia, just trying to throw out names. Again, Worthington. There's a lot of small game companies out here, and I think they're producing a lot of good games. I've played a lot of good games in the last 2 years alone. Just, you know, recently I've played Combat Infantry from Columbia. That was a good game. Wing and a Prayer by Lock and Load. Old School Tactical. You know, Academy with Vikings. And they've got some interesting stuff coming out. But guys, again, if you're enjoying these videos, I'm trying to do daily videos now, and some of them may just be rambling discussions like this on game systems. But when I saw that thing on the beer industry, it really got me thinking that, you know, the war game market is the micro brewery of the game industry. You know, it's the little guys, it's the 100 little breweries that are challenging the Anheuser-Busch's or the Ambev in the gaming market. Gone are the days of the Parker brother and Hasbro being the big dogs. They're still the big dogs in total game sales, but they're pushing out, you know, nothing like the hobby industry. It was interesting, real quick, one last thing before I go. It was the top 10 games, hobby games from last year, and none of them were war games. They were some Fantasy Flight, Z-Man, Days of Wonder, Terraforming Mars, number 7, I love that game. Ticket to Ride still, Carcassonne. But this was interesting. Number 10, Betrayal at House on the Hill by Avalon Hill. Never would have thought it. WizKids owns Avalon Hill, and of course Catan, which is its own engine. Scythe was number 1 by Stonemaier. But Mansions of Madness, number 5, number 6. and Pandemic number 5. But please give us a subscribe, give us a share, give us a like if you enjoy this. I'm going to do more like this. Like I said, we're going to talk about game rules, game systems, game reviews, previews. This Saturday on Kickstarter, we are launching our Hold the Line American Civil War. If you enjoy Hold the Line, and we've had a number of them, Hold the Line American Revolution, Hold the Line French and Indian War. This Saturday on Kickstarter at 3 p.m., we are launching Hold the Line American Civil War. I'll be putting out more on that, hopefully on Thursday morning. I'll show some preview pictures of some of the art as we finalize it. We've taken it from the board, and now we're doing it as presentation art. It's a big difference in what you want people to see rather than a playtest counter. You'll show them what it should look like on the board. But guys, I appreciate it. Go below, post your comments. Let me know your thoughts. I want to know what you're thinking here, because you guys drive the game industry more than anything. Us, board gamers. I'm a board gamer. But guys, tonight if you get a chance, play a game. If not, tomorrow, think about playing a game. Weekend's coming up in 4 days. It's a chance to teach a game. But guys, most of all, happy gaming.